The dark truth about Bill Gates. He's slightly out of vogue as far as billionaires go. He continues to be insanely rich and powerful, of course, but his name is thrown around in the social media age less than people like Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and Elon Musk. In the 2000s, he was the darling to much of the world, though. Seen as one of the world's most generous and inventive people, there was a point when it seemed that Bill Gates could do no wrong. This positive perception was mostly due to people's lack of knowledge about the Microsoft founder, but that positive perception barely existed at all in the 1990s and before. He was racking up quite a reputation for shady business practices and the like before he started the philanthropy PR campaign that slowly got a large number of people on his side. A few public bumps here and there have seen his rep take a bit of a hit since, but there's still a mystifyingly positive perception around Gates for the most part. Here we're going to give you a look at the full story of one of the world's most powerful figures. It's certainly not the story he'd want you to have. One of the first myths surrounding Bill Gates is his supposed personification of the American dream. The story of him as a college dropout is often used to inspire people into believing anyone can achieve everything. Obviously, it's good to encourage people who may never graduate from college, but the story gives a false mythos to Gates. He was never a struggling character who made his fortune against all odds. In fact, the former richest person in the world was always likely to end up somewhat wealthy. His father was the founder of the law firm Shidler, McBroom & Gates, and also served as a director for Costco Wholesale in his later years. There was always a lot of money pumping around the Gates family home. Gates grew up attending private prep school with some access to computers, which was exceedingly rare at the time. Gates left Harvard University during his second year to go into business with MITS, a large electronics company at the time. The Bill Gates story is hardly one of exceptional struggle. No doubt that the journey required some hours of dedication and a keen intellect, but most people never get anything close to the same opportunities to capitalize on their best attributes. Bill Gates' success has certainly been a rare case, but so was the huge opportunity he was handed from a young age. Microsoft's expansion under Bill Gates was littered with accusations and the general sense that the computer whiz was willing to ignore laws and ethics if it meant some extra cash. It's still widely agreed that the company managed to escape unscathed from the 1998 antitrust charges that circulated throughout U.S. governmental circles for almost a decade. Microsoft had been bringing the spotlight on itself via its huge success in the 1980s, but that spotlight became a target in the 1990s when competitors started disappearing, and the personal computing market looked set to become a Bill Gates monopoly. The Federal Trade Commission began the case in the early 1990s. When that was closed, the Department of Justice and 20 different states' attorney generals rapidly picked it back up. When Microsoft began giving away its browser software for free, their top competitor, Netscape, plummeted out of existence. This was the main inspiration for filing of the antitrust charges against Microsoft. Luckily, there are more choices available now. But have you ever tried using a Microsoft browser? Internet Explorer loads more slowly than if you just ordered a library card and found the information in a book. The Department of Justice was doing us all a favor by trying to rein in Microsoft browsers that early. Jokes aside, though, how crappy Microsoft's browsers have been is great evidence of why there is a fight to prevent monopolies. With Netscape gone, Microsoft had very little motivation to make a good browser that people would enjoy using. Customers had nowhere else to turn. We got lucky that things kept evolving, and eventually we got alternatives like Chrome and Firefox. If Microsoft hadn't got the warning sign of being found guilty of monopolistic actions, a ruling that got overturned, then they could have kept squeezing out competitors. Being responsible for Internet Explorer at all is a dark truth in itself. Even before that, Microsoft first got off the ground with some unethical and barely legal tactics. Gates lied to IBM about having an operating system in the 1980s, and when they came to see it, he just went out and licensed it from another company. Unsurprisingly, the company that gave out the license weren't happy with the fraudulent misuse of their creation.
Fuck Microsoft! Okay. Fuck!
In the end, Gates settled with them out of court. All the bad stuff wasn't tricky behavior and smokescreens, though. In those early days, Gates built up quite a reputation for being abusive towards staff, and it is still thought that this culture was so prevalent that it still lives in the DNA of Microsoft today. One woman who was among the company's first employees sued the company for sexual discrimination, and Gates overall seems to have done a great job of ingraining a bullying culture. It's been nicknamed the abusive manager style, although he's spent years trying to gloss over the fact with his meek, nerdish persona. The political system in America has taken just as much of a bruising from Gates as his employees. In fact, his unelected influences on politics goes far past U.S. borders, but his impact is most noticeable in Washington. Whilst you can debate how useful different parts of government are, there are at least elements of democracy in places like Washington. No one has any vote on the power Bill Gates holds, however, and no one gets much of a say over how the wealth he controls is used, despite it being worth more than some countries. He happily defends the benefits of power being safe from democracy. In one interview, he claimed, "Elections are rarely won because vaccination systems were strengthened, even though a strong vaccination system underlies a healthy, productive society." It's essentially a nice way of saying people can't be trusted to vote for their own good. It's clearly very important to Gates that the vast power he's allowed to wield is kept safe from anyone else's input. When one interviewer asked him how his consistent tax avoidance synced up with his supposed altruism, he made out that it was not anyone else's business whether those funds ended up in partially elected control rather than his own pockets. It can't be denied that the billionaire parts with most of his money, but it is under the strict control of what he deems best for his vision and his legacy. He prefers to sidestep annoyances such as voters or Democratic input on a fortune worth more than the Ukraine's GDP. Before we continue, if you like my content due to the sensitive nature of this video, please support me more and subscribe so I can produce more high-quality content like this and support this channel. Thank you very much. Let's have a look at how this unelected ruler influences politics in the U.S. for now. Few individuals even come close to competing with how much the Microsoft co-founder gives under the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation name. Arabella Advisors is a for-profit consulting firm that oversees transfers of wealth to the Democrat Party. Their 1630 fund has been described by Politico as a secret money group, but we can see how much Gates has given through his tax returns. As of 2019, he has committed over $419 million to the scheme. He could well have topped over $500 million by now. This isn't about being blue or red. The Republicans receive more super PAC donations overall. Gates has given to Republican groups such as the Lincoln Project in 2020 as well. Although you might find it more bitter when Democrats receive it, considering they like to pretend they're against it. Are you really happy with one person being able to make such a difference in how politics are run either way? He could throw that money behind the most or least perfect candidate in the world. Is one person wielding that much power over politics democratic at all? Is there anything anyone can do to curb his influence? He avoids the taxes designed for people that wealthy, so instead he can give it to whichever politician or initiative he fancies. He's even ventured into massaging public opinion the way he wants outside of the direct political cycle. In total, the Gates Foundation has awarded over $11 billion in funding to 471 universities. If you think this funding is unconditional, then you're being naive. Accepting such large amounts of money makes institutions susceptible to becoming a donor's plaything. Having power over these places of education only serves to further mold people in Gates' image. How young people are educated should be something that's decided by parents and voters. You probably don't want some old billionaire you've never met with a history of being called a bully and a fraud deciding your kid's curriculum. Yet, he's able to poke around and throw money at what he thinks is problematic. Whether or not you agree with his views on things like vaccinations or abortion, do you agree with surrendering communal and democratic decisions to him? To make things even worse, it doesn't seem like his agenda is just about what he thinks is best for people anyway. Most evidently with Big Pharma since the COVID pandemic. Gates has reportedly spoken out about the need to widely give out vaccines. The problem isn't whether you agree with vaccination or not, though. Whilst praising Big Pharma and encouraging demand for it, he has been simultaneously investing in the industry. The foundation's trust annual tax return in 2019 listed Pfizer among its corporate investments. You don't need to turn these facts into conspiracies or picking sides. However, it's impossible to deny that someone with such a platform shouldn't have this conflict of interest. Can you really trust someone who claims to be some altruistic savior if he's really making money off his solutions? You wouldn't trust someone running for president who owned a tech company and told everyone, "We need to stop taxing my company for your own good." Sometimes he just seems to be saying things he cares about to appear caring. In one 2021 interview, he said that the world should reduce its carbon emissions to zero. Only a month earlier, he'd been involved in a bidding war to buy the world's largest private jet company. Unless he was planning to recycle all of those jets into recycling bins, how was that going to help reduce carbon emissions? All these positions of power he now exploits are just not unduly earned. Of course, he loves the myth of being a one-man company in a garage that would soon change the world. He was far from the only person responsible for Microsoft's success at any stage, though. As well as the stolen software with which he first tricked IBM, Gates also pressured co-founder Paul Allen into giving him shares in the company for free when he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. A team of talented engineers who will probably never get the recognition they deserve also played an invaluable role in getting the company off the ground. There's no doubt that Bill Gates made the most of their work to end up in a position of almost unrestrained power. Throughout every stage of the company's growth, it has been faced with some dark truths. From the early bullying days to the monopolistic tech practices and now his attempts at monopolizing American politics, when will the march for ever more power stop? Eventually, it stops being about personal success and starts being about control over others. You can be happy for people making a good life for themselves, but are you really comfortable with this lucky person being able to make a certain life for you or for your family? Bill Gates gets far more of a say in making that a reality than we'd like to admit, and that's the dark truth.